This is the Fantasy Football Unlimited podcast with your host, Kevin Murray.
Welcome to the Fantasy Football Unlimited podcast. On this episode, we have a guest that is doing some pretty incredible things in the fantasy sports community. From Club Fantasy, it's the one Hudsonian himself, Joshua Hudson. Welcome to the show, my friend.
How we doing, man?
Doing well. Glad to have you here. Lots of fun things to talk about for sure. Anything going on big in your life right now?
Oh, lot of work. We're getting into summer. I work on a beach bar, so
Nice.
Always busy times for me, just with my day job, and then of course, ramping up for the 2024 fantasy football season, which always mind always turning with different ideas and different things that we can do. So we got a lot of stuff in the pipeline at Club Fantasy and Women of Fantasy Football. So really excited.
Awesome. Well, those unfamiliar with your work, can you share some of the with the listeners and viewers some of the details behind what you're doing at Club Fantasy and, of course, the Women of Fantasy Football movement?
Yeah, absolutely. So clubfantasyffl.com, it's where we post all of our articles. Our video content is over on our YouTube page. That's youtube.com/clubfantasyffl. Same thing with Women of Fantasy Football, the womenoffantasyfootball.com. Pretty simple, right? And then it's at women_FF on Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube as well. We've got 2 ongoing Women of Fantasy shows. Well, 3, I guess, if you want to include Masterclass in that as well, which is kind of all these shows are on both the Club Fantasy and Women of Fantasy Football YouTube channels. We kind of simulcast them there. Anything we can do to, broaden the horizons and provide more light to any content that we produce that includes women. So a lot of stuff going on. I mean, we're getting ready to launch a new Women of Fantasy Football show. It's called Mock Girl Summer. It's our latest mock draft show that we're doing. It's going to be hosted by Wendy Early and the latest addition to Football Guys, Julie Papworth. So really excited about that. That's going to be kicking off on Thursday. So you can catch the first episode after you watch this because it's going to debut around that time. So that's going to be really exciting. We got best ball shows. We have golf DFS shows. We have redraft shows, dynasty shows. We cover it all over at Club Fantasy and Women of Fantasy Football. So
I love it. Yeah, exciting times. And you're right. The 2024 season it's ramping up. It's a great summer to dive into all the great content that you're producing over there. Let's rewind back a bit, back to your early days. Where did your passion for sports begin?
Oh God. It's probably like 2 or 3 years old. My mom has like home videos of me like sitting down watching boxing matches and like kind of mimicking the movements and stuff. So boxing, baseball, football, like I watched it all growing up. As I got older, that a lot of those interests kind of centralized a little bit. And I've mainly been a baseball, football guy for the better part of my life. I still watch boxing every now and then. I don't follow it near as closely as I used to, unfortunately, but basketball is always kind of been like I gravitate more towards players than I do teams or the sport itself. Hockey I used to get into when I was a kid, but then they went through this period where they had like 3 strikes in like 10 or 12 years and like everybody changed teams. And I'm like, all right, I'm over this. You lost me. So, I don't live too far from where the Tampa Bay Lightning plays. Every once in a while, like I'll pop in, I'll watch a game. And going to the games are very fun. A few years back, stepmom Lauren and I actually, we went to a game and had a lot of fun there with her and her husband. So it was a lot of fun.
Nice. Yeah, live hockey is pretty special for sure. So who were your favorite players, teams growing up? I know you're an Eagles guy. Who were your favorite players across the sports spectrum, even, boxing, everything? Who were your favorites when you're growing up?
Oh, man. Baseball was Mike Piazza and Derek Jeter. Derek Jeter is my hero. Always has been, always will be. I'm a huge Yankees fan, if you can't tell by the hat. But Mike Piazza was he was a catcher, and that's what I played growing up. So that was kind of like, that's who I gravitated towards. Football, Bo Jackson was that dude.
Nice.
Like I absolutely loved watching him play. I was a big Donovan McNabb fan as well, and that's really what led towards my Eagles fandom. Dan Marino, I watched a lot. Both my parents had season tickets to the Dolphins way back in the day, so I kind of grew up watching a lot of Dolphins games. Basketball, I was a huge Penny Hardaway fan. Like,
Nice.
those commercials with Chris Rock were absolutely fantastic. Like that's really what drew me in. And I've always been a big sneakerhead, like big Nike guy. And the old pennies those were some of my favorite kicks. Boxing, I loved Mike Tyson and Roy Jones Jr. Those were two of my dudes. I loved watching them fight.
Man, you're speaking my language with a lot of these guys. Penny, I got a little Penny. Just I got a little Penny in my collection, right?
That's what's up.
That's awesome. I love talking about or hearing about people's favorite players and athletes growing up, because it brings a lot of sentimental feelings back to those days as
Absolutely.
well. So as a sports fan, what was your biggest loss?
Oof. Well, I got two of them that I can name off the top of my head. The first one was the 3-0 collapse of the Yankees to the Red Sox, because not only was it a 3-0 collapse in the ALCS, but we lost to the freaking Red Sox, which is never fun. And then the 2004 Super Bowl when the Eagles lost to Patriots. That was a hurter. Those are the two that definitely stick out the most to me.
What's your favorite moment of all time in sports that you can think of as a fan?
Oh man, favorite moment. I when I was looking at the show sheet earlier, I was actually thinking about this, and I had one that initially popped into my head, and I can't even think of it right now. But watching Jeter get his 3,000th hit, that was a big one, because that was a home run. I think. I'm pretty sure it was.
I think it was.
The definitely the Nick Foles Philly special in the Super Bowl. That was definitely a big one. That got the monkey off the back for the Eagles. And then watching the 96 World Series championship for the Yankees. That was another big one, because we hadn't won in my lifetime since I'd been a fan. Last title I believe was 78 before that. So finally seeing them hoist that trophy, and then that started like the whole dynasty run with the Yankees. So those are definitely big sports moments for me.
I love it. When did you discover fantasy sports? When did you dive into fantasy?
Fantasy for me started a little over 20 years ago, which kind of showing my age here a little bit. But so I just finished my senior year of high school, and that was when I really kind of like dove into fantasy football. And then that kind of like started a wave. Like, my freshman year of college, I did fantasy basketball, I did fantasy baseball. I think I only did fantasy basketball for like 1 year maybe. And then I just realized like I don't watch this sport enough to like really get into it. I did, I think probably like 3 to 5 years worth of fantasy baseball, but every single year I kept finding myself like by July, I'm just like, man, I'm kind of over this. Like this season is just way too long to pay attention to fantasy. And then, but I've played fantasy football ever since. And it's hilarious to me because I'm sitting here complaining about fantasy baseball being so long. I literally consume fantasy football content every day, 365 days a year. Why is baseball too long? I don't get it, but I don't know. The mind works in crazy ways. But yeah, I've been playing fantasy football for a long time.
When obviously baseball, it's just different. Like it's grueling day to day. Like you get arm fatigue just setting lineups, right?
Yeah. You need Tommy John surgery by July.
Yeah, exactly. It's too much to think of. I've played a ton back in the day, but like most people, it's kind of filtered in just football, because fantasy football is special in so many ways.
Mm-hmm.
Whose content did you discover early on? When you were playing the game?
For the longest time, it was all on ESPN, because that was the platform that I used. So obviously there are articles that live on those sites. They kind of hit you right in the face. So like Matthew Berry was kind of like, that guy for me. Stefania Bell was another one, consumed all of her content. I got in on the 06010 podcast very early. So, him and Stefania, those two were like front and center for me when it came to fantasy football content. And I really didn't venture out much from there. Like I knew a couple of the bigger names in the space. Funston, I know, was a big one at that time because he was with ESPN, then went to Yahoo, I believe. Eric Carable was, his content was there for a lot, because I also know he did baseball. So like when I was doing a lot of baseball research, it was, him and Matthew Berry for a long time. So, and then like, as I started to get more involved in the industry, when I first started creating content, that's when I really started to discover a lot of the other faces in the industry.
It is true. Most of the time, people won't that play fantasy. They just consume in the past more, but even still, casual players, they just consume the content in front of them, right?
Yep,
From the
100%.
host networks, and so I think that's the big. What's most special about this fantasy community is that once you discover it, you realize how much is out there, how much talent is out there when it comes to content creation. So
Yeah,
I can
100%.
definitely relate to that. I play in tons of Yahoo early on, loving Brandon Funston and Brad Evans and those guys. And then, it took for me, it took a long time to discover, how much was out there. And once I did, I wanted to dive in just like a lot of people. So when you first started playing fantasy, what was it that hooked you? What did you like the most about the game?
I don't know. Probably just the competition of it. Like, I've always been a very competitive person. Played a lot of sports growing up, and then once you hit a certain age, you realize you're not as athletic as you like to think you are. You try to find something that sort of feeds that competitive itch. And so, like, we'd set up a work league. I think it was my first or second year, because at that time I was working at Nike. And so, obviously, if you're working at Nike, you probably like sports. You're probably naturally a pretty competitive person. So it was really easy to get everybody kind of hooked in and wanting to try it and play it. And then, just going through college and everything, you start those like home leagues and stuff with your college buddies. And, just kind of like getting together for like the live drafts and all those different types of things like that. That to me is what really kind of hooked me was the camaraderie of it. And, then it's slowly kind of boiled over into, getting to meet new people that live across the country, across the world, and seeing all the different facets of the fantasy community. And that's really what's kept me going with it.
Yeah, I love it. No, I think that league engagement is what brings most people to the table. And then, I mean, just again, discovering the community is pretty special. Do you have one league that you consider your primary main league?
I used to. So we had, and one league that I was in, it was called the Script Club. So it was kind of a play on Pac-Man Jones. It was like an old interview that he did a long time ago. And that actually was the basis for what started Club Fantasy.
Okay.
And I was in this league for, had to have been close to 15 years. And, I'd been really in depth here in the fantasy community and just kind of seeing how other people do different things. And they kept vetoing my trades, and it was really pissing me off. And so I was just like, I can't do this anymore. Like, the commissioner of mine is an old high school buddy. We've known each other since we were like 5. And he was the one that started Club Fantasy with me. And I was just like, dude, I can't do this anymore. He's like, yeah, I kind of figured. He was like, I'm actually surprised you lasted long as you have, because I just kind of became like the villain of that league. So it just got to a point where it kind of felt like they were vetoing my trades out of spite. And I'm just like,
terrible. So
you can't do it. So that after I left that one, I haven't really had a home league in a while. I had one with some friends of mine locally, because we all kind of met over at Buffalo Wild Wings, where basically once I started doing content, like I would go there every Sunday and I would just watch games so that way, I could write and podcast about it. So started meeting some, people around there, because they're like, oh, you're that guy that sits at the bar with his laptop. Like, what is all this about? And they just naturally want to start a conversation with you. But I think that league's kind of on its last legs. So I don't know. Like, I have my longest running dynasty league. I think that's probably the closest thing I have to a home league at this point.
Do you have an industry league that's your favorite? That means
I have a couple of industry leagues. I think the one that I'm most fascinated with, it's our Ballers and Friends. So it's with a lot of the fantasy footballers writers. So I got introduced to that through my co-host with Club Fantasies, no pun intended, Ryan Weiss. When he first started out in this industry, he was a writer with the Ballers. And so he invited me to this one, because basically it was like 5 of the Ballers writers, and then each of them would invite a friend to the league.
Oh, cool.
And so like I've gotten to know a lot of the current and former Ballers writers through this league. And there's definitely been some changeover. I mean, you've had some of the Ballers writers that no longer write with the Ballers, so now they become the friends. And then some of the newer writers kind of get introduced into the league. So, I mean, let's see, Matthew Betts is in that league. Ryan, obviously, Kate Majuk is in that league. Michael Liu was in that league for a while. I know he's no longer creating content, but I honestly like playing in that league with Michael. I learned so much about Dynasty, a lot. That dude is a savant. And it's a shame he's not creating content anymore. But I know I'm missing a few others, but there's been a lot of good people that have cycled throughout that league. So I would say that's definitely one of my favorites.
I love it. Who's been your biggest rival in fantasy over the years? So the one person that you just can't lose to, or the one person when you win, it's most rewarding.
Yeah, so my buddy Cole, who I grew up with and again started the fantasy site with, that I would definitely say him, but I think we only have one league that we're in this year. Going forward, like we used to play in like 3 or 4 different leagues together, and I think now we're just down to one. We have a long running auction league that we're in. But I gotta say Ryan, like that's as of right now, like Ryan and I think we're in like 3 or 4 different leagues together. We've got a couple like club fantasy leagues that we're in. We've got our dynasty, and then the staff writers league, and then our club fantasy, like the OG dynasty league. And then I think we're in like 2 or 3 other leagues together, including Scott Fishbowl. So we're always like, all right, who's gonna outdo who this time? So
I love it. Yeah, you got to have a rival in fantasy for sure. Now, in leagues that you played in the past with live drafts, I mean, have you ever had any leagues where you had fun traditions, quirky things, last place punishments, anything like that?
Unfortunately not, mostly because the people that I play with, if they ever ended up having to do a punishment, they would cry like little babies and just leave the league. So it was just never worth doing anything like that.
I love it. What are your favorite league settings and formats to play in?
I mean, for the longest time, really the most like crazy thing that I ever did was PPR, which I know is kind of becoming like an industry standard now. But I think the craziest settings in any league that I'm in is Scott Fishbowl. So like I typically get introduced to anything crazy through that league. Definitely, I've done the super flex, I've done the tight end premium. And for the longest time, like super flex was like a thorn in my side. I'm like, I just don't get it. And then I finally I found a way to do it. Stop focusing on the second quarterback. You can still actually win with only one quarterback. So
yeah.
So that's always been kind of fun to play with. But I think it's really interesting to see like like when you introduce like the points for like first downs and carries and things like that, and just kind of seeing like how it skews like some of the scoring and then alters like draft strategy with different things. But I feel like a lot of those types of settings are reserved. I don't want to say reserved, but used more frequently in dynasty leagues versus redraft leagues.
For sure. Yeah. I think a lot of people will use more creative scoring in dynasty just to mix it up. And
Yeah.
it's fun to mess around with settings, but sometimes it leads to just some kind of wonky scoring that isn't, it's not worth the hassle of trying to be creative when you can just enjoy the original type of game that you're used to. But it's for everyone.
My life motto is keep it simple, stupid. So sometimes it's just easy to just like stick to the PPR and go with it,
Yeah, exactly. If you got to be that creative to make your league fun, is your league really fun, right? There's other ways to make your league enjoyable and fun, and it's not always about the setting. So, the people obviously is a huge part of making a fantasy football league fun. So when did you first start creating content? Well, when was it that just made, when and what was it that made you dive in?
So the first time I ever started creating fantasy football content was actually back in 2012. I was living out in Las Vegas. I was doing an internship because I was doing my master's degree online, and I was working with a production company that was filming out in Las Vegas. And I had an old college buddy of mine that was living out there at the time. He used to play professional basketball overseas. And so like Vegas was kind of like his home away from home, so to speak. And he came to me with this idea that he wanted to kind of start a website that, kind of like, it was very similar to Grantland in the sense that, wanted to be able to kind of have like the sports content plus like the, the pop culture side of things. Cause both of us were, big sports fans and pop culture nuts. And so, we were going back and forth on some ideas, and he knew that I was a big fantasy guy. And so he was like, would you be interested in doing like some fantasy content? And I was like, yeah, I never thought about it, but sure. My master's degree was literally in writing. So I'm like, sure, let's go for it. And we started a podcast, and I think we got maybe like 7 episodes in before my co-host just kind of like flaked on me. And but that was like my first like real introduction to creating content. So it was really short-lived. And then in 2016 was when my buddy Cole and I, we were just like, we've been flirting with this idea for a while. He's like, why don't we actually just do something? So we started with a podcast, and we just kind of like shaped it around our fantasy league. And we started a Tumblr blog, and we're putting out rankings and stuff, and doing like some waiver columns and things like that. And we're like, this is never really going to grow at all outside of like our little league, and unless we actually like start kind of doing some more with it. So being a graduate from Full Sail, and the school itself having a very large like network and community of graduates, and a lot of different like groups and stuff on Facebook, and different programs, I was like, I reached out to a couple of former teachers, and they were like, hey, why don't you go through and just put a post out in one of the groups? And so I reached out, and I was like, hey, if anybody might be interested in doing something like this, like feel free to hit me up. We can have a conversation, et cetera. And I had a couple students that had reached back out to me. One of them being my current, no pun intended, co-host, Joe Zolo. And so for a while, it was Joe, Cole, myself, and another kid named Patrick, who used to work with ESPN in Mexico. And so Patrick helped us a lot on Twitter, and really kind of helping us grow our Twitter following. And Joe helped us a lot on the Instagram side of things, doing graphics and posts and things like that. And Cole eventually ended up kind of stepping away. So I took on the bulk of like the writing, while those guys handled the social media and stuff. And my girlfriend at the time was wanting to get into graphic design. So she did a lot of our graphics, and Joe would go through and schedule the posts and things like that. And unfortunately, her and I broke up. And so I have another buddy of mine who'd been doing graphics for a really long time. So he kind of stepped in and helped out. And Joe introduced me to his girlfriend, Maggie, who she was a film grad from Full Sail, and she toyed around with graphics and things like that. So for a long time, she was helping us with graphics as well. And from there, like we just kind of like, we kept the podcast going. Like Joe and I were doing it for a long time on a radio network that he had created to kind of give like Full Sail students a way to kind of like, grow their careers in radio and sports media and things. And eventually we ended up shifting from there and doing the show on YouTube and all the other podcast networks and stuff. And slowly we've just been growing from there. I mean, we introduced our, I invited Ryan onto a podcast once. He put something out on Twitter and like chimed in or something. And I know it was about like Mark Ingram on the Ravens, like how good he could be or something like that. Mm-hmm. And just literally that relationship started based on a Twitter post. Like, and now he's like, I couldn't imagine doing the site without him. So it's crazy, the power of social media. But that's really how Club Fantasy got started.
That's incredible. How about the creation of Women of Fantasy Football? Everything about that, the movement. How did that all begin?
So Faith Enos can talk a lot more about that. So I will try to give the abridged version of it. But we always had this, like, I don't want to call it a hole in our schedule, but we always had this like lineup of shows that we would do in August that honestly were getting kind of boring to do. And I was like, the whole thing with Bobby Sylvester and Fantasy Pros kind of went down. And we were, obviously Faith and I have a great relationship, and I'd gotten to know Stepmom Lauren really well. And there's a lot of great women in the space, and me being somebody that was raised by women, like my mom, my grandmother basically raised me. Like I've always had that sort of like, protective bear mentality of women just in general. And so I brought this idea to Faith. I was like, what if we, instead of doing these shows that we typically do, which, I'm kind of over, why don't we do like a series of shows that highlight women in this space? And she was like, count me in, like down, let's go. And I suggested getting Stepmom Lauren involved. And, at that time she was with the Ballers, obviously. So she's got a great relationship with Ryan, and, her catalog of sites that she was working with was just consistently growing. So we got them involved, and we put this together probably in like 6 to 8 weeks. Like, we did it really quickly. And initially it was just going to be a show, or like a series of shows, interviewing women. And then we decided to kind of do like the fundraising aspect of it. And we raffled off some items through like GoFundMe, and we ended up raising like $1,500 that first year. And it was just on a whim. And so we kind of reconvened after everything happened, and we were like, holy crap, like, people are really into this. Like, maybe this is something we should consistently do. And so we did it again the next year, and we reshaped it a little bit. So instead of like Ryan, Joe, and myself also being on the show, it was like, you know what, Faith, Lauren, you two take care of it. Like, we don't need to be there. Like, this isn't about us. This is about women. Right. So, and then one of the guests that Faith had invited on for the second year was Fox Sports sideline reporter Laura Oakman. And she has an organization that she founded called Galvanize. And Galvanize is set up to essentially provide women the tools in broadcasting and sports media that Laura did not have when she was first breaking into the industry. And so the first couple of years, we were raising all the money and giving it to an actual charity, the Women's Sports Foundation. And that relationship just kind of went downhill after our handler ended up, moving on to a different organization. And they just kind of looked at us as like, oh, you guys are going to give us money? Okay, cool. Awesome. And that's not really what we wanted. Like, we wanted somebody, or a partner, that we could like really build a relationship with. And so we spent a good like 6-7 months like talking back and forth with Laura. And, Faith and I had some internal conversations like, Galvanize isn't a charity. So like, how can we really like, quote unquote, sell this, right? Because everybody's all up in arms about charity. And I hope that people don't watch this and kind of get like, oh, this isn't a charity. Like, what are we donating towards? Like, this is just me being transparent. Like, we have never once said that Galvanize is a charity. We're not raising money for charity. We're raising money for an organization that does a lot of really, really good things. So what we ultimately created was this WOFF Galvanize Scholarship Fund. And the scholarship helps to pay the way for women to attend these boot camps and seminars that Galvanize puts on. So again, it's all about giving women the opportunity and the tools to excel in this industry, right? Because they face a lot of uphill battles, whether it's because guys just suck in general and take advantage of women because women are trying to get ahead in their careers, or just because they're douchebags, plain and simple. So, we want to help them in any way that we can. And, heading into, based on everything that we were able to raise last year from the raffles and the best ball leagues and everything, we've been able to offer up 4 different scholarships for the boot camps this year, which is huge because that's for women that may not have been able to attend these camps as they try to, grow their careers in sports media.
Well, it's such a natural fit. Like, it just makes sense that pairing is women of fantasy football and Galvanize. Like, it's
yeah, it was absolutely
right?
perfect. Yeah, and and the one thing that really sold us with everything was that Laura was like, it's great to be able to get this money, but I'm not trying to just like find a cash cow. Like, I want to build a partnership. And I was like, you got me. Like, let's go.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I remember, the start of Women of Fantasy Football like it was yesterday, but it's amazing to think back, to then and to now what it has become.
Oh yeah, if you had told me 5 years ago where we would be at, I would have been like, you're freaking nuts. Like, there's no way. But
yeah,
here we are. Amazing. Yeah.
Incredible stuff. Incredible. So now you got, you trademarked and patented, and you're going to NFL events, right? With press credentials and sending people so much fun stuff, that you guys have experienced along this journey, and, obviously a lot ahead. What is the future of Women of Fantasy Football?
Bigger and better. I mean, that's, one of my favorite lines from any type of media that I've ever consumed was from the Netflix show Luke Cage, where he's always like, always forward. And that's kind of my mentality with everything. It's all right. So we're here. What's next? Like, where are we going from here? So I don't like to settle for stagnancy and, just kind of like coasting. Like that's not who I am as a person. And I'm always looking for what's next. And, the press events is great. Like absolutely love this. Doing, a couple shows here and there. I think it's great. The one thing that I know that we're trying to pivot from with Women in Fantasy is actually doing like traditional content. We've tried doing it. It just doesn't seem what we need to do. Like we have Club Fantasy for content, right?
Yeah.
That's a great way for us to be able to amplify women's voices. With Women of Fantasy, it's not necessarily about bringing every single woman under that banner. It's shining a light on every woman in the industry or everybody that, wants to be able to play fantasy football or enjoy sports in general, right? And so, for us, I don't know, we've had a lot of different conversations. I don't want to spill the tea too early because I don't want to get too far ahead of myself if something like this can't come to fruition. But we've had a lot of different conversations. I'll just kind of leave it at that, and just know that there's a lot of good stuff that we're hoping will come out of the pipeline here within the next 6 to 12 months.
I love it. I love it. What's been the most rewarding part of your journey in the industry?
Women of fantasy football, straight up, plain and simple. Like that was something that was truly never on my radar. And when it happened, and really it happened very organically, and just the response that we got, and seeing, when we host the Women of Fantasy panel at the Expo every year, like the first panel, like we were stuck in the back rows of like these very small rooms. And not only was it standing room only, there were literally people standing in the hallway that couldn't even see the panel just to listen to it. And even last year at the Expo, when we moved into the larger space that Bob booked out, like, I mean, I think outside of Des Bryant's High Point presentation, like I'm pretty sure we were the next biggest panel there. So that to me, like that just tells me straight up, like there's a need for this. There's a desire to want to give women a voice in this industry. And, I think there are a lot of great people that are doing that. I mean, I've seen a lot of women come onto your podcast, and I think it's absolutely fantastic. Casey Kasem's Get Real podcast, like that's another great podcast that, amplifies voices of women in this space. And, I know that we're not the only ones doing it. I don't want to be the only ones doing it. I hope there are more people and more sites out there that are ready and willing to, give women an opportunity to spread their wings and show what they're capable of, because there are a lot of really smart women in this space.
Absolutely. There's an amazing group of women in this space, an amazing community in general, right? And so much support. I've seen it out there. It's fantastic. And that, that brings us to talking about the fantasy community. Pretty amazing stuff, right? The amount of people that you and I both know in this industry that are just doing everything they can to help others. Talk to me about the experience for you going to the Fantasy Football Expo. You mentioned, the Women of Fantasy Football panel. Talk to me about the Expo experience in general for you.
It was a little nerve-wracking at first because I'm a very introverted person, a little reclusive at times, and large crowds and I just really do not mix very well. But luckily, I surround myself with pretty extroverted people like Ryan and Faith and Joe, my co-host, that are not shy about saying, hey, let me introduce you to Josh. And that's a really easy way for me, obviously, to meet new people. But I also come from a sales background. So blindly shooting DMs has never been a problem for me. It's just talking in large crowds and like one-on-one with people is kind of like, okay, this just doesn't ring a bell for me. But luckily there's a lot of alcohol involved, which makes things a little easier. But also is a bit of a detriment. I remember having a really great conversation last year with Stacey Stern from Underdog Fantasy. Can't remember a damn lick of that conversation at all, though. So there's that. She caught me in the middle of a beer pong tournament. I'm sorry, Stacey, for listening.
I love it.
But no, just being able to, connect with people that, you talk with all the time online, or, you've had the pleasure of bringing on to a show that you do. That's always a highlight, right? And being able to, kind of shake their hand. And even if it's only like a 5-minute conversation, because the next person's trying to pull your attention away or something like that, or, you're moving on to the next spot or the next event or whatever it is, like, just that 5 minutes in general is it's a really great opportunity.
That's pretty special. What's your favorite memory from the expo? Is it that first panel?
Oh yeah, that first Women of Fantasy panel, that hands down, very much the first impression. Like I hadn't. That was actually was it my first expo? No, the first expo was 2021 for me, and we had a very brief Women of Fantasy panel there. So Ryan at that time lived outside of Canton, and he knows Bob Lung pretty well, and we were heading into year 2 of the WOFF podcast, and Bob actually asked Ryan if he wanted to come on the stage and talk for 10-15 minutes in between sets or something. And so it was just Faith, Ryan, and myself at that point, just kind of talking about what we were doing with the WOFF podcast and the raffles and how important it was to the industry. And from there, it's just the first official panel was 2022, the second one last year. And we're talking more about what we're going to do for this year. We kind of want to expand upon it a little bit, maybe try something a little different. But we're still working out the details of that.
I love it. Lots of excitement ahead for sure. Yeah, and again, that was such a special event. I remember that energy in that room. It was so magnetic. It was fantastic. Such a fun event, pivotal event, I'm sure, for you guys when it comes to that movement, because it definitely catapulted a lot of great energy into the next year, where you again had a massive panel last year and a huge audience. So it's lots of excitement ahead for sure. What's your favorite event of the expo? Obviously, it's turned into a 3-4 day event, overall over the weekend. What's your favorite event of the expo?
Oh man, I know the big Saturday party is usually a big one. It's usually over in the Hall of Fame Stadium. They'll have the beer pong tournaments. I know the 2022, I think it was sponsored by Fantasy Alarm, and I don't know. It's just it's nothing really special that goes on there. It's a fun little gathering, and you've got this huge stadium where you can just bounce around. But for me, it's less about the events themselves and just the downtime in between, where I can be hey, you want to go grab a drink over at this place? Or I remember last year, I met up with Britt Flynn, Nate Polvote, and his wife Jen, and we sat at this pizza parlor for it felt like 2.5 hours, just shooting the shit. Just talking and, having drinks, having some pizza. And that to me is what the expo is all about. The events are cool and everything, but I love that kind of one-on-one time with really awesome people.
The in-between.
Yeah.
I like that. That's a good answer. Have you been to a Scott Fish Bowl live event yet?
Yes. So the very first one, I believe, was in 2022, if I'm not mistaken.
22, yeah.
So I did the Orlando live draft because I used to live in Orlando, and I live probably 2 hours from there, give or take. And I know quite a few people from the industry that are around that area. So I was like, you know what, we're going to go to this one. Faith made the drive up because she lives about an hour and a half south of me. And so we drove up there, and, Troy King was there, Joey Wright, Zach Berger, Chalupa Batman. It's a lot of really great people. And Faith will tell you probably the most memorable moment from that was when she sniped me on Deontay Johnson. And that really kind of pissed me off. So yeah, just, we did it at one of the meeting room spaces in one of the Disney hotels.
Yeah,
and right. So last year I went to the Orlando live draft, but I didn't actually draft in it. Scott had a Central Perk division, and I'm the biggest Friends fan, so I had to join that one. But so I was like, you know what, but I'm still gonna make the trek up there and hang out with some friends and see some people. And so I did that. This year I'm gonna do the same thing. I'm gonna go up to Orlando, but not actually draft in it, because the following week I'm actually going to be going to the New York City SFB live draft.
Nice.
So that'll be a fun experience.
Totally. And Faith's going to the New York, right?
Yep.
That's right. Because she's turned.
I'm telling. This is why I surround myself with outgoing people, because they literally just drag me places. They're like, "Hey, you're coming with me." I'm like, "All right, cool."
I love her style, because she last year went to Trophy Smack. I flew down from Seattle down to Trophy Smack. She flew from Florida to Trophy Smack. And so I love her style. She's going to a different place every year. That's a great way to do it. Great way to do it. And that's a special event for sure. Concentrated, micro expo type event, but super special and it's so unique because every city is different. Every group is different. Everybody experiences something a little different at these live events. Makes you jealous because I personally would love to be at all of them, and I know Scott would, I'm sure, love to be at every single one of them because they're truly special. So if you can get to a live SFB draft, it's definitely something I would highly recommend.
100%. Yeah, it's definitely a lot of fun. It's a cool way to meet new people, and for me, because I'm unfortunately not going to be able to go to the expo this year. Like the SFB live draft kind of like helps fill that community void for me.
And the cool thing I think also about live SFBs, unless you're flying to them or driving to them far distances, is you get to actually meet people that are actually,
in your
close
area.
to where you live, right? You can, surprising to me. I know I hosted Seattle that first year, and it blew me away with how many people that contribute in the industry are near you. And I think every city has experienced that. Like, and there's just so many great connections that are created because of these live SFB drafts. So,
awesome. I've seen. Even just from the expo, like one of my contributors, Joel Worth, like I met him at one of the expos, and that's how we got connected. I know other sites that have met people from SF or the SFB lives or even the expos, and that's how they got brought onto their teams, right? So it's a really cool way to kind of see the different facets of the community, even if you're not a content creator, and then find a way to get roped into the world of content creation. That's what it's all about. So
for sure. And with the expo, for sure. I mean, it's about there's tons of friendships made and a lot of relationships professionally that are created from the expo. So highly recommend getting to Canton, Ohio every August because it's the place to be. It's sad to hear that you're not going to be able to make it, but hopefully the next year you'll be back.
Yeah, that's okay, Kevin. You'll have to find somebody else's phone to steal and snap selfies on for you. Every time I scroll through my camera roll, I'm like, oh, there's Kevin. Okay, he took this picture.
Oh, that's awesome. I love that. That's great. Let's dive into some rapid fire questions. I'll just throw out some questions. Let me know what first comes to mind. I was going to ask, what do you enjoy most about what you're doing in this industry? But it's definitely the women of fantasy football.
Well, it's women of fantasy, but also like just being able to provide opportunities for others in this industry. Like, I love that. I mean, I go back to when I first got into just the world of production. I was 17 years old. I was in high school, and somebody said, "Hey, are you interested in an internship?" And I'm like, "Yeah, sure, cool." And I worked at an AM sports radio station for, the better part of the next like 18 months before I went off to college. And just being able to produce these types of shows and meet the people that they would bring on as guests, like that was invaluable to me. So I'm just trying to pay it forward when it comes to that. And anybody that wants an opportunity, please hit me up. Like, I would very much love to have a conversation, see what you might be interested in, and how we can shape you as a content creator. Like, I'm all about that. Like, that's a lot of what we do at Club Fantasy, and more importantly, we have fun. Like, at the end of the day, this is a game. We love playing it. Like, it's okay to not be serious about everything. So, and I think that to me is what gets lost most in the world of fantasy football.
That's a beautiful answer. I love that. What are your favorite hobbies, activities outside of fantasy sports?
God, I don't even think I have any anymore. No, I'm a big writer. I love writing. I love storytelling. I've written short films. I've written web series. I even wrote a movie script once. Writing in general is really near and dear to my heart. That's, again, what one of my degrees is writing. And I have a really good friend of mine who I went to grade school with. She's actually a best-selling author. And so her and I, we talk all the time, and, just kind of like, trade stories back and forth. Like, hey, it'd be really cool to collaborate on this one day or something like that. And, maybe one of these days I can, like, maybe I can build Club Fantasy to a point where I don't need to sit down and actually do, like, feel like I have to do 95% of everything. But, I for now, it's okay. Like, I love doing it because, like I said, I love being able to give opportunities to other people and provide that outlet for them. And, as Club Fantasy grows, then, hopefully I can, pull a step back and maybe only do like, 80% one year, 70%, and let other people kind of take the reins and do some stuff. So, but yeah, no, I love writing, and movies, television is a huge hobby of mine. Like I love TV. Like that really was what inspired me to want to get my degree in writing, because I wanted to be a TV writer.
Nice. What is your all-time favorite TV show?
Friends. Not even a debate. Friends. That's literally without that show, I wouldn't even have an interest in writing. Like the moment that show went off air, I was going through a really bad breakup, and like I would just sit down and watch reruns of the show. And then one day I was like, you know what? I just want to write my own version of Friends. So I did. I sat down, I wrote it, and I was like, this is what I want to do. Like I want to write TV shows. So that's why I went to get my degree in. So.
It's a pretty special show for sure. How about an all-time favorite movie?
I have a few. True Lies. I know that's really random.
It's a great movie.
I was a young and very impressionable teenager, and Jamie Lee Curtis was really hot. Basically anything Marvel. I love the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I'm a huge comic book nerd, so the first Blade movie like really hit me. The first X-Men movie, the first Spider-Man movie, the first Avengers movie. Like the moment that was announced, I like had tears in my eyes, because I was like, oh my God, this is my childhood come true. Deadpool, the first Deadpool is definitely up there, because that was funny as all hell.
yeah, for sure. Do you have an all-time favorite sports movie?
Oh, Remember the Titans, hands down.
Okay.
And I think more people in this world need to watch that movie these days.
Yeah, no, that's I would say that's probably the most popular answer when I ask that question.
Yeah, that one, and there's a few boxing movies too that I really enjoy. Like I think when it comes to sports movies, boxing movies to me are hands down the best. Like Hurricane with Denzel Washington was really good. The Rocky movies are great. Creed, the first Creed one with Michael B. Jordan was absolutely fantastic. Southpaw with Jake Gyllenhaal was great. And then another one that I really enjoy that I wasn't sure that I was going to was The Wrestler with Mickey Rourke. That one's a really good one too.
Good answer. Good observation. I think it's true. Boxing movies, they can pull it off. Whereas other sports, it's sometimes tricky to get that in action that.
Yeah, because I think it's the type
right?
of I think it's more just the type of individual and like the struggles they go to that kind of draws you into sports like wrestling and boxing for whatever reason. I don't know why, but it's very rare that you find these individuals that I don't want to say have a good life, but like don't really face like the day-to-day struggles that maybe some people do. Like those types of people don't usually get drawn into actually fighting in boxing. So if you haven't seen this one, the Mike Tyson series they did on Hulu, I think it's called Tyson, but that one's a really good show they did. They put that together. It's loosely based on Mike Tyson, but it's a really good one.
I love it. Now, what's your favorite band, artist, musician?
Ooh, favorite rock is definitely The Offspring. They really hit home for me when I was growing up. Love their music. Linkin Park is another one. Absolutely love Linkin Park. Actually, my very first SFB division was Linkin Park division in 2021. Met some really cool people during that one. Favorite rap artist, definitely Eminem. Eminem, Nelly, those Cash Money crew back in the day, like those were like my big influences in music. So
I love it. And you and I were both at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame at the same time once upon a time. Yeah. So I love it. So at this stage, what are you most grateful for?
Most grateful? Oh, man. In life, that I'm still alive. Because my eating habits would probably tell you that I shouldn't be. But no, I mean, I'm grateful for, the friends and family I have in my life that, actually take an interest in what I do and that are supportive of me. For a long time that was very few and far between. And, telling people it's like, I'm going to work towards being a writer, or I'm going to, build this fantasy football website. And they'd look at me like I was freaking stupid. Like, get a freaking real job. Like, what are you doing? Like, but so just being able to have people in your corner that are supportive, like that to me is what I'm most grateful for.
I love it. Now, can you name some people? You've definitely name dropped several on this show so far, but can you name some of the people that just have had a huge impact on you during your journey in the fantasy space?
In the fantasy space, I definitely want to shout out Faith, Ryan, and Joe. They've really been like my inner circle when it comes to everything that we do, and people that I bounce ideas off of, and they show a lot of support for obviously just sticking with me, because it's not like I'm paying them. I definitely want to shout out Gator J as well. He's been a big confidant of mine for a little bit, and it took 2 years, but we finally got him on the team, and he's doing a lot of really great things with us and in the fantasy community as a whole. But I know I'm going to forget some people, but everybody that has linked up with us at Club Fantasy and Women of Fantasy Football, not just today, but yesterday and previous years, like whether things ended well and you were able to move on to bigger and better things, whether things were a little rocky and things just didn't work out, like I'm grateful for that, because regardless of how you may feel about me or I may feel about you, like I took something from it, and I'm somebody that I'm consistently wanting to learn, whether it's from a mistake or how to get better or how to improve upon something that's already really good. Like those are interactions that I value. And, I'll throw Kelly into that mix as well. Like I adore Kelly. Like, and honestly, without the expo, I probably wouldn't even know her. So, bringing her into the fold of Women of Fantasy Football has been huge as well. And, Austin and Joel and Drew and Chris, who've been with me for a really long time, meeting Hoove last year and bringing him on board, and, getting ready to do the show with Wendy and Julia and getting Stacy involved in the team. Like, and again, like I know I'm forgetting people, but like everybody that works with us now, like I adore each and every one of them.
I love it. That's wonderful. Wonderful stuff. Now, do you have any advice for people that want to get more involved in the fantasy space, creating content?
Just do it. It's the simplest mantra. Like I said, I worked for Nike for a long time, and that was always my favorite slogan, to a point where I have a Nike swoosh tattooed on my neck, because it's a reminder to just do it. And, it's really easy to sit back and be like, oh, what if it's not well received or this and that? At the end of the day, you're not going to know unless you do it. And even if it's not well received, guess what? If you enjoy doing it, stick with it. Like we were literally, when we started Club Fantasy, we were doing a podcast for our freaking league mates. And now we're over 1,000 subscribers on YouTube. So, somebody's eventually going to find it. It takes time, but if you're passionate about it and you love doing it, just do it.
Just do it. And that fits your keep it simple mantra too,
keep
right?
It simple, stupid.
I love it. I love it. Is there anything we haven't covered that you want to share before we close things out?
No, that's it. I mean, be sure to like, follow across all the socials, Club Fantasy FFL, Women of Fantasy, Women of _FF. Those are the two big things that I'm working on, and that we put a lot of time and effort into growing and making sure that we're there to provide a great community for you, but also help you win some fantasy championships, because at the end of the day, that's why we do this. We want to win, baby.
We'll win and have fun doing it. So obviously,
exactly.
Club Fantasy has been a great resource for a ton of people out there. Definitely recommend it. And obviously, the Women of Fantasy Football movement is it's not just a phrase. It's a movement. Things are growing. I can't wait to see where things go with that. Looking forward to seeing you in Canton, Ohio next year. But obviously, until then, best of luck with everything, Josh. Always rooting for you. Wish you all the best, buddy.
I appreciate you, Kevin. Thanks for having me, because I'm telling you, I feel like a fish out of water on this podcast with some of the guests that you've had on and are about to have on. So I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Thank you for listening to the Fantasy Football Unlimited podcast. Until next time, be sure to follow and subscribe to all of FFU's social media accounts for daily content.